Hello children, welcome back to online classes of St. Joseph's Academy. I welcome all the students of class 1 to this online video class. This class is for English Mulberry and our topic today is poem Out in the Garden. Today we are going to read the poem Out in the Garden. I will explain you and read the poem for you. I am Sneha, your English teacher, and let us start today's class. Today's topic is poem Out in the Garden. Today we are going to read the poem Out in the Garden and I will explain the poem to all of you. Out in the garden one fine day, with my ball I went to play. Children, these are the starting lines of the poem. You can see here a boy is moving out of his house with a ball in his hand. He has come out in the garden to play with his ball. Let us read the full poem now. Children, let us read the poem now. I want all of you to repeat it after me. Out in the garden, one fine day, with my ball, I went to play. I bounced it right. I bounced it left. I bounced it well on one fine day. Out in the garden, one fine day, with my kite, I went to play. I flew it right. I flew it left. I flew it high on one fine day. Children, this is the poem Out in the Garden. When I was reading the poem, I noticed that there are many rhyming words in this poem. Day, play, play, day. And this was quite interesting and an enjoying one to read. Let us read this poem once again. Out in the garden, one fine day, with my ball, I went to play. I bounced it right. I bounced it left. I bounced it well on one fine day. Children, this is a poem about a boy who goes out in the garden to play with his or her ball. The poet can be a boy or a girl. Okay, so what does he do in the garden? He or she goes out in the garden with his or her ball to play. Okay, children, all of you might have noticed when you throw a ball, it comes back to you. Either it comes back to you or it bounces back. What is the meaning of bounce? The meaning of bounce is when you throw a ball, it moves up and down and it doesn't stop. This is called bouncing. So the poet is saying, I bounced it right, I bounced it left. The poet is saying when he or she goes out in the garden on one fine day. What do you mean by one fine day here? Here the meaning of one fine day is a pleasant day. When the weather is pleasant. The poet went out in the garden to play with the ball. And it bounced right, it bounced left, and to make rhyming, the poet has included the last line, I bounced it well on one fine day. Then out in the garden, one fine day, with my kite, I went to play. I flew it right, I flew it left, I flew it high on one fine day. The poet says, on another fine day. That means on another pleasant day. The poet goes out in the garden again, and this time he or she goes out with the kite. He or she goes out with the kite to play. I flew it right, I flew it left. You might have seen the kite flying in the sky. It flews right, it flews to the left. It is swaying in the sky. I flew it high on one fine day. The poet says, he or she flew the kite high on one fine day. When you fly the kite, slowly and gradually, it goes high up in the sky. So in the same way, when the poet flies the kite, initially it goes to the right, to the left, and then it flew high in the sky. You can see here the poet is standing with the ball. And in the second picture, you can see the poet is bouncing the ball. In the first picture, the poet comes out with the ball to play in the garden. And in the second picture, you can see him playing. He bounces the ball and plays with the ball. Then on another fine day, on some other fine day, the poet again goes out in the garden and brings a kite to play with. He flew the kite high up in the sky and he enjoys the fine pleasant day by flying the kite. Children, I hope you have understood the poem well, and I would give you a recap of the poem through the summary. The poem Out in the Garden is about a child who goes out in the garden to play. It describes the joy of a child who is playing all by himself or herself in a garden. So, the poem is all about a child who goes out in the garden to play. And in the poem, through the poet's words, we can understand that how much the child is excited when he plays by himself or herself in a garden. The poet says that he or she went out to play with a ball in the garden one day. The poet played by bouncing the ball in the garden. Another day, the poet went out in the garden with his or her kite. The poet flew the kite in the garden. So, the poet says that he or she went out to play with the ball and the poet played by bouncing the ball. On another day, the poet went out in the garden with his or her kite and enjoyed by flying the kite in the garden. So children, this is all about the poem. I hope you have understood it well. Today's topic is poem Out in the Garden. Today we are going to read the poem Out in the Garden and I will explain the poem to all of you.